The CEO's laughter cut through the auditorium like a blade, sharp and meant to wound. Ethan Carter stood there in his stained maintenance uniform, 32 years old and invisible to everyone who mattered, while 300 of the country's wealthiest tech executives joined Vanessa Whitmore in mocking the janitor who'd dared to speak. But in exactly 47 minutes, that same woman would stand frozen in front of a screen, staring at an equation that would prove she'd been catastrophically wrong about everything. This is the story of one night that destroyed a billion-dollar company's arrogance and rebuilt it from scratch. A story about the single father nobody respected and the CEO who learned respect too late. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The overhead lights in Conference Hall 3 had been burning for 11 straight hours, and Ethan Carter could smell the particular kind of exhaustion that came from brilliant people slowly realizing they weren't as brilliant as they'd thought. He pushed his cleaning cart along the back wall, trying to stay invisible. That's what maintenance workers did at Blackstone Technologies. They became part of the architecture, human furniture that the real employees looked through rather than at. The cart's left wheel had been squeaking for 3 months. Ethan had requisitioned a replacement twice. Both requests had been ignored. "We're going in circles," someone said from the center of the room. The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, Blackstone's chief technology officer, a man whose yearly bonus exceeded what Ethan earned in a decade. "Every model we run hits the same wall at integration point 7. Vanessa Whitmore stood at the front of the auditorium, 30 years old and sharp as broken glass. She'd built Blackstone Technologies from a garage startup into a company worth $8 billion in just 6 years. Forbes called her a visionary. TechCrunch called her ruthless. Her own employees called her the Ice Queen when they thought she couldn't hear. She could always hear. "Then we're missing something fundamental," Vanessa said. Her voice carried that particular tone wealthy people used when they were trying to sound patient, but were actually calculating whose career to end first. "The Brisbane transportation system isn't some theoretical exercise. We have actual contracts, actual deadlines, actual investors who will walk if we can't deliver." Ethan emptied a trash can near the back exit. The bin was full of energy drink cans and wadded-up printouts covered in failed equations. He'd been cleaning this building for 4 years. He'd seen a lot of expensive failures disguised as innovation. "Maybe we need to revisit the core architecture," suggested a young engineer whose name Ethan didn't know. The kid looked about 25, fresh out of Stanford or MIT, still idealistic enough to think problems existed to be solved rather than monetized. "We've revisited the architecture 17 times, Marcus said. "The problem isn't the architecture. It's the integration methodology." "The problem is neither of those things," someone else interjected. Ethan had stopped paying attention to who was speaking. He'd learned that in rooms like this, titles mattered more than ideas. A suggestion from a vice president carried more weight than a solution from an analyst, regardless of which one was actually correct. He moved to the front section, working his way down the side aisle with his spray bottle and cloth. The presenters ignored him completely. To them, he wasn't even human, just another piece of equipment, like the projector or the ventilation system. The digital board at the front of the room displayed what looked like a catastrophically complex network diagram. Ethan had seen enough of these presentations to recognize the basic structure. Transportation logistics, probably. System integration protocols, the kind of work that required teams of specialists and budgets that could feed a small country. "What if we partition the neural network differently?" someone suggested. "We tried that in version 12, Marcus replied. "Not like this. What if we—" "It won't work." Ethan wiped down a section of wall near the stage, half listening to the conversation the way you'd listen to rain, present but not engaging. His daughter Emma had a science project due Friday. He needed to help her build a model of the solar system. She wanted to make Saturn's rings out of old CDs, which Ethan thought was clever, but he wasn't sure where to find old CDs anymore. Everything was digital now. "We're approaching this wrong," Vanessa said suddenly. Her heels clicked against the stage floor as she paced. "We keep trying to force the integration points to work with our existing framework. What if the framework itself is the problem?" "The framework is industry standard," someone protested. Industry standard is why everyone else fails, Vanessa shot back. We're Blackstone Technologies. We don't follow standards, we set them. Ethan moved closer to the board, squinting at the diagram while he wiped down the edge of the stage. Something about the network structure looked familiar, though he couldn't quite place why. The entire design assumption is wrong, he muttered. He hadn't meant to say it out loud. The room fell silent so quickly it felt like someone had flipped a switch. 300 people stopped talking, stopped typing, stopped breathing. Every head turned toward the back corner where the janitor stood with a spray bottle in one hand and a cleaning cloth in the other. Vanessa's eyes locked onto him. They were gray, Ethan noticed. Cold gray. Like January steel. "Excuse me?" she said. Ethan felt his face go hot. He'd made a mistake. A massive, career-ending mistake. You didn't speak in rooms like this when you wore a uniform with your first name embroidered on the chest pocket. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I didn't mean to interrupt." "No, please." Vanessa's smile could have frozen vodka. "Share with us. You clearly have insights that our team of PhD engineers somehow missed." Scattered laughter rippled through the auditorium. Not kind laughter, the ugly kind, the type that needed a target. Ethan set down his spray bottle. His hands were shaking slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "I shouldn't have said anything." "But you did say something." Vanessa walked toward him, her heels echoing in the silence. "You said our design assumption is wrong. That's quite a claim from someone whose job description includes—" "What, exactly? Cleaning toilets?" More laughter, louder this time. "Offices," Ethan said quietly. "I clean offices and maintain the machinery in the lower levels." "Ah, machinery maintenance," Vanessa said, playing to the crowd now. "So that makes you qualified to solve a problem that stumped our entire engineering department." She wasn't yelling. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, her voice carried that casual cruelty that came naturally to people who'd never been powerless, never been invisible, never been the person everyone else looked through. Ethan should have apologized again. Should have picked up his cleaning supplies and walked out. Should have remembered that he had a daughter at home who depended on this job, this income, this carefully maintained invisibility. Instead, he heard himself say, "Yes." The laughter stopped. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a specimen under glass. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yes," Ethan repeated. "I can solve it." The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. 300 people held their collective breath, waiting to see what would happen when the janitor challenged the queen. "This should be entertaining," Vanessa said finally. She gestured toward the stage. "By all means, show us how it's done." Ethan looked at the digital board, then at the 300 faces staring at him. Every survival instinct he possessed screamed at him to back down, apologized, retreat into the safety of invisibility. But something else screamed louder. He'd spent 4 years watching these people waste millions of dollars on problems he could solve in his sleep. 4 years listening to them congratulate themselves for mediocre solutions while ignoring the fundamental flaws in their assumptions. 4 years being invisible. He was tired of being invisible. Ethan pulled off his work gloves slowly, deliberately. He set them down on the edge of the cleaning cart. Then he walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for him. No one spoke. A few people pulled out their phones, probably to record what they assumed would be the most entertaining failure they'd seen all month. Vanessa handed him the stylus with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Please, enlighten us." Ethan stood in front of the massive digital board, staring at the transportation network diagram that had consumed 11 hours of the country's best engineering minds. The design was elegant, sophisticated, built on principles taught at every major university, and completely wrong. He touched the stylus to the screen and began to write. The first equation he put up looked strange, old-fashioned, almost. He wasn't using the sleek corporate notation that Blackstone favored. His symbols came from textbooks that predated most of the engineers in this room, from a time when people built things to last rather than to impress investors. Someone behind him whispered, "What is that, punch card era mathematics?" Scattered chuckles. Ethan ignored them. He wrote 3 more lines, building the foundation of something the room didn't recognize yet. "Is there a point to this?" Vanessa asked. Her voice had an edge now, impatience replacing amusement. "The integration points aren't failing because of the network architecture," Ethan said, still writing. "They're failing because everyone in this room assumed the load distribution would follow a standard curve. It's a transportation system," Marcus Chen said from somewhere in the audience. "Load distribution always follows a standard curve. That's basic network theory." "For a closed system, yes," Ethan agreed. He drew a new diagram, his hand moving quickly now. "But Brisbane isn't a closed system. It's a live city with variable traffic patterns influenced by—" "We accounted for traffic variables," someone interrupted. "Models 17 through 23 specifically addressed—" "You accounted for traffic," Ethan said. "You didn't account for human behavior patterns that create traffic." He tapped the screen, highlighting a section of the original design. "This integration point assumes users will distribute evenly across access nodes. But humans don't distribute evenly. They cluster. They follow patterns. They make irrational choices based on comfort and habit rather than efficiency." A senior engineer near the front leaned forward, squinting at Ethan's work. Her expression had changed from amused to confused to something else entirely. Concerned. "The entire model is built on rational actor theory," Ethan continued. "But that's not how humans work, especially in transportation. People take the same route every day, even when it's slower, because it feels familiar. They avoid certain stations because of bad lighting, even if those stations are more efficient. This is absurd," Vanessa cut in. "We're engineers, not psychologists." "That's the problem," Ethan said quietly. He wrote another equation, this one more complex. The symbols looked wrong to the corporate engineers watching, but a few of the older specialists recognized what he was doing. One of them stood up. "Is that Nakamura's behavioral distribution theory?" the specialist asked. "Modified version," Ethan said. "Nakamura's work was theoretical. I'm applying it to actual infrastructure." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "Nakamura's theories were never successfully implemented. The computational requirements alone—" "Only if you try to map every individual," Ethan interrupted. He drew a new diagram, this one showing clusters rather than individuals. "But if you group users by behavioral archetype, the computational load drops by about 70%. The room had gone quiet again, but the quality of the silence had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like attention. Ethan kept writing. He was in it now, fully committed, no turning back. "The reason your integration points fail at node 7 is because that's where 3 different behavioral clusters intersect during peak hours. Your system assumes even distribution, so it allocates bandwidth accordingly. But the actual usage pattern creates a spike that's about 40% higher than your model predicts." He pulled up the original diagram and overlaid his behavioral cluster map. The failure points lined up perfectly. Someone in the audience whispered, "Holy shit." Vanessa's expression had changed. The condescending amusement was gone. She stared at the screen with an intensity that Ethan recognized, the look of someone who just realized they might be wrong. "This is very creative," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "But creativity isn't the same as accuracy. Where's your data? Your validation studies? Your peer-reviewed research?" "I don't have any of that," Ethan admitted. The laughter started to return, softer this time, tentative but growing. "So you're basing this on what exactly?" Vanessa pressed. "Intuition? A hunch?" "Experience," Ethan said. "Experience maintaining air conditioning units," someone called out. More laughter, louder now. Ethan felt the familiar weight settling over him, the weight of being dismissed, of being invisible, of being the person nobody respected. For a moment, standing under those bright lights with 300 people laughing at him, he almost walked away. Then he thought about Emma. His daughter was 8 years old and brilliant in ways the school system wasn't equipped to recognize. She saw patterns everywhere, in the way leaves fell from trees, in the way people moved through crowds, in the way stories were structured. Last week, she'd explained to him why her favorite cartoon was more mathematically sound than the educational programming her teacher recommended. Emma spent every day in a world that looked through her instead of at her, because she was young and poor, and her insights didn't come wrapped in the right language. Ethan refused to teach her that invisibility was inevitable. He turned away from the screen and faced the audience directly. "I grew up in Detroit," he said. "My father worked for an automotive manufacturer. Not designing cars, installing the robots that assembled them. When I was 12, the plant started having problems with their automated systems. Random failures, no pattern anyone could find. Cost them millions in downtime." The room was quiet. Not the hostile quiet from before. Something different. "My father came home one night and told me about it," Ethan continued. "He said the engineers kept looking at the robots, trying to find mechanical failures. But he'd noticed something. The failures only happened on specific shifts, with specific crews. He realized the problem wasn't the robots. It was the humans operating them. Different crews had different habits, different ways of interacting with the automation. The robots were fine. The interface between human behavior and machine logic was failing." "That's an interesting anecdote," Vanessa said. "But they ignored him," Ethan said. "Because he was just a technician, not an engineer, didn't have the right credentials, so the failures continued for 6 more months until they finally brought in outside consultants who told them exactly what my father had said on day 1. He gestured at the screen behind him. "This is the same problem. You've built a beautiful system based on perfect logic, but you're implementing it in a world full of imperfect humans who don't follow logical patterns. That disconnect is killing you at integration point 7, and it'll kill you at points 9 and 14 too once the system scales up." A woman in the front row raised her hand tentatively. "How do you know about points 9 and 14? "Because they're the next places where behavioral clusters intersect," Ethan said. "You haven't seen the failures yet because you haven't reached that scale. But you will. And when you do, the entire system will cascade." Marcus Chen stood up. He looked angry, but also shaken. "Who are you? Really?" Ethan almost laughed. "I'm exactly who you think I am. I'm the guy who cleans your office and fixes the elevator when it breaks." "That's not possible," Marcus said. "You're demonstrating knowledge of advanced systems theory, behavioral mathematics, network architecture." "I read," Ethan said simply. "Reading isn't the same as understanding." "No," Ethan agreed. "Understanding comes from application. I've spent 4 years maintaining the infrastructure in this building. I've seen how people actually use the systems you design. I've watched your beautiful theoretical models collide with messy reality." He turned back to the screen and started writing again, faster now. "You want validation? Fine. Pull your traffic data from the Brisbane pilot program, not the sanitized summary reports, the raw feed. Look at nodes 4, 7, and 12 between 6 and 8 a.m. You'll see clustering patterns that don't match your distribution model." A younger engineer was already typing on her laptop. Her eyes went wide. "He's right. The clustering is... Oh my God, it's almost exactly what he predicted." Vanessa walked up onto the stage, standing close enough to Ethan that he could smell her perfume. Expensive. Probably cost more than his monthly rent. "You're telling me," she said quietly, "that you've been working here for 4 years. Watching us. And you never said anything?" "Would you have listened?" Ethan asked. She didn't answer. "I'm going to ask you a question," Vanessa said, her voice dropping low enough that only he could hear. "And I want the truth. Did someone put you up to this? Is this some kind of corporate espionage, industrial sabotage?" Ethan stared at her. "You think I'm a spy?" "I think you're either a spy or the most overqualified janitor in history." "I'm a single father who takes whatever jobs pay enough to feed my daughter," Ethan said. "I work nights cleaning offices because the hours let me be home when Emma needs me. I maintain machinery during the day because I'm good at it, and it pays slightly better than cleaning. That's it. That's the grand conspiracy." Something flickered across Vanessa's face. Not quite guilt. Not quite recognition. Something unstable, quickly suppressed. She stepped back and addressed the room. "Credentials. I want to know your credentials." "I don't have any," Ethan said. College degree? No. Technical certification? No. Where did you learn systems theory? Library books? Online courses? YouTube lectures? The room erupted in murmurs. Someone laughed. Not mockingly this time, but in disbelief. This is insane, Vanessa said. She was pacing now, her composure cracking slightly. You're telling me you taught yourself advanced engineering through, what, free online content? MIT, OpenCourseWare, has excellent materials, Ethan said. So does Stanford. Carnegie Mellon has a good series on network theory. I'm partial to Professor Sarah Chen's lectures on behavioral mathematics, though her notation takes some getting used to. A man in the third row stood up. Ethan recognized him. James Rodriguez, one of Blackstone's principal investors. I want to see the rest of it. I'm sorry? Vanessa said. The solution, James clarified. He's identified the problem. I want to see if he can actually solve it. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She was losing control of her own presentation, her own company, her own carefully constructed authority. Ethan could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How to regain the upper hand. How to reestablish dominance. Fine, she said. Solve it. Show us how a janitor fixes what our engineering department couldn't. The word janitor landed like a slap. She'd meant it that way. Ethan turned back to the board and began to work. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in the auditorium was the scratch of stylus against screen. Ethan built his solution line by line, equation by equation. He didn't use the elegant corporate notation that Blackstone preferred. His work looked old-fashioned, rough, built from fundamentals rather than fashionable theory. But it was sound. He showed how to map behavioral clusters without requiring massive computational resources. He demonstrated a load-balancing algorithm that accounted for human irrationality. He redesigned the integration points to flex with actual usage patterns rather than fighting them. And then, because something stubborn and maybe self-destructive had taken hold of him, he went further. He showed them how to scale the system beyond Brisbane, how to apply the same principles to any city, any transportation network, any infrastructure project that required machines to interface smoothly with unpredictable human behavior. He gave them a framework worth billions. When he finally set down the stylus, his hand was cramping and his uniform was soaked with sweat. He turned to face the audience. No one spoke. Vanessa stood at the edge of the stage, staring at the screen with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe. Or anger. Or the particular look people got when their fundamental assumptions about the world suddenly proved wrong. An older man in the back stood up slowly. Ethan didn't recognize him, but based on the expensive suit and the way others deferred to him, he was probably important. Maybe very important. The man started clapping. It was slow at first, deliberate. Then the woman next to him stood and joined in. Then Marcus Chen. Then the young engineer who'd found the data verification. Within 30 seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, 300 people applauding the janitor they'd been laughing at less than an hour ago, everyone except Vanessa. She stood perfectly still, her face pale, staring at Ethan's solution like it was a mirror showing her something she didn't want to see. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but in the sudden silence after the applause faded, everyone heard her. "You're right," she said. 2 words. They seemed to cost her everything. "Your solution is correct. Better than correct. It's revolutionary." She paused, visibly struggling with what came next. "And I've been wrong about this project, about my assumptions, about you." The room was so quiet, Ethan could hear the ventilation system humming. "I owe you an apology," Vanessa continued. "I judged you based on your position rather than your capabilities. I mocked you in front of this entire room because I assumed someone in a maintenance uniform couldn't possibly have valuable insights." She took a breath. "I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." Ethan waited for the but. There was always a but. "I built this company on the principle of finding the best solutions regardless of where they come from," Vanessa said. "And tonight I forgot that principle completely. I let arrogance and assumptions override my own values. She turned to face him directly. I'm sorry. The apology sounded genuine. It also sounded like it was physically painful for her to deliver. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. We need to discuss next steps, Vanessa said, switching back to business mode like flipping a switch. This solution needs to be implemented. You need to be compensated appropriately. I need to go home, Ethan interrupted. Vanessa blinked. What? It's almost midnight. My daughter's probably asleep, but I promised I'd be home before she went to bed. I'm already late. Your daughter can wait another hour, Vanessa said. We need to... No, Ethan said firmly. She can't. He walked over to his cleaning cart, pulled his gloves back on, and grabbed the handle. The left wheel still squeaked as he pushed it toward the exit. Wait, Vanessa called out. We need to talk about compensation, employment terms, integration planning. Ethan paused at the door. I'll be here tomorrow night, same time I always am. You can find me if you need me. He left the auditorium and headed toward the service elevator, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind him. His phone buzzed as he waited for the elevator. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched Emma when he worked late. She fell asleep waiting for you. I didn't have the heart to tell her you'd miss bedtime again. See you tomorrow. Ethan stared at the message until the elevator doors opened. He'd just solved a billion-dollar problem and probably changed the trajectory of his entire life. But he'd broken a promise to his daughter. He wasn't sure which one mattered more. The elevator descended into the lower levels where the real machinery lived. The infrastructure that kept buildings like this running while the people in expensive suits took all the credit. Ethan knew these levels better than anyone. He'd spent 4 years down here, maintaining systems, fixing problems, being invisible. Maybe that was about to change. Maybe he didn't want it to. The elevator reached the ground floor. Ethan pushed his cart out into the empty lobby, past the security desk where Martinez was doing a crossword puzzle, past the glass doors that separated Blackstone Technologies from the rest of the world. Outside, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional car passing by. Ethan loaded his cleaning supplies into the trunk of his 15-year-old Honda and drove home through empty streets, thinking about equations and integration points and the look on Vanessa Whitmore's face when she'd realized she was wrong. He thought about Emma, asleep in her room with her science project materials spread across the floor. He thought about the squeaky wheel on his cleaning cart that nobody had bothered to fix. He thought about tomorrow, and whether being visible was actually better than being invisible. By the time he pulled into his apartment complex parking lot, he still hadn't decided. The apartment was dark when Ethan got home, just the glow from the streetlight outside filtering through the thin curtains Emma had picked out at Goodwill. She'd wanted the ones with stars on them. They'd been $4 more than the plain ones, but the look on her face when he said yes had been worth every cent. He set his keys down quietly and checked Emma's room. She was asleep, sprawled across her bed with one arm hanging off the edge. Her science project supplies were exactly where Mrs. Chen's text had said they'd be, scattered across the floor in organized chaos only an 8-year-old could create. Construction paper, markers, a half-finished poster board with the solar system written across the top in her careful handwriting. Ethan picked up the materials and stacked them neatly on her desk. He pulled the blanket up over Emma's shoulders and stood there for a minute, watching her breathe. She looked like her mother. Same dark hair, same small nose. Sometimes it hurt to look at her. Most of the time it was the only thing that kept him going. He left her door cracked open and walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed loudly. It had been humming loudly for 6 months, ever since something in the compressor started failing. He kept meaning to fix it, never found the time. His phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously, a stream of notifications that lit up the dark kitchen like a strobe light. Ethan pulled it out and stared at the screen. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 12 voicemails, all from Blackstone Technologies. He sat down at the kitchen table and started scrolling. Most of the texts were from numbers he didn't recognize. A few were from people he vaguely knew, shift supervisors, other maintenance workers, the woman from HR who'd processed his employment paperwork 4 years ago. One was from Vanessa Whitmore herself. We need to talk. Tomorrow. My office, 9 a.m. Not a request. A command. Ethan set the phone down and stared at it like it might explode. His shift started at 11 p.m. He was supposed to clean the executive offices on the 14th floor, replace the air filters in the server room, and fix whatever had broken in Conference Hall 7. He wasn't supposed to have meetings in the CEO's office. He wasn't supposed to exist in the CEO's world at all. Another text came through, this one from Marcus Chen. Holy shit, man. Do you have any idea what you did tonight? Call me. Ethan didn't call him. He sat in the dark kitchen listening to the dying refrigerator hum and thinking about the look on Vanessa's face when she'd realized her entire project had been built on a false assumption. Not angry, not embarrassed, something worse. Afraid. People like Vanessa Whitmore didn't get afraid. They got even. At 8:30 the next morning, Ethan dropped Emma off at school. She was still half asleep, her backpack dragging on the ground behind her. Dad, she mumbled, you forgot to help with my project. The guilt hit him like a punch. I know, sweetie, I'm sorry. We'll work on it tonight, okay? You said that yesterday. I mean it this time. Emma gave him the look, the one that said she was 8 years old and already learning not to trust promises from adults. She got that look from her mother, too. I love you, Ethan said. Love you too, Emma replied automatically, already walking toward the school entrance where her friend Mia was waiting. Ethan watched until she disappeared inside. Then he drove to Blackstone Technologies, parked in the visitor lot because maintenance workers weren't allowed in the executive garage, and took the elevator to the 14th floor. Vanessa's assistant looked up when he approached the desk. She was young, probably fresh out of college, with the kind of polished appearance that came from having time and money to care about polished appearances. Can I help you? She asked. Ethan Carter, I have a meeting with Ms. Whitmore. The assistant's eyes widened slightly. Oh, yes, she's... One moment. She picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. Ethan couldn't hear what she said, but he heard Vanessa's response clearly enough. Send him in. The assistant gestured toward the massive double doors behind her desk. Go ahead. Ethan had cleaned Vanessa's office dozens of times. He knew the layout by heart. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the minimalist desk that probably cost more than his car, the expensive art on the walls that he'd never understood. He'd never seen it during daylight before. The morning sun turned everything into sharp angles and hard shadows. Vanessa sat behind her desk, backlit like some kind of corporate deity. She wasn't alone. Marcus Chen stood near the windows. James Rodriguez, the investor from last night, sat in one of the leather chairs. A woman Ethan didn't recognize was leaning against the bookshelf, arms crossed. Close the door, Vanessa said. Ethan closed it. Sit down. He sat. The silence stretched out uncomfortably. Vanessa studied him like he was a problem she was trying to solve. Marcus looked curious. James looked amused. The woman by the bookshelf just looked skeptical. I'll be direct, Vanessa said finally. Last night you demonstrated knowledge and capabilities that don't match your employment record. I need to know who you really are. I told you who I am. You told me you're a self-taught janitor who learned advanced systems theory from YouTube. That's not an explanation. That's a punchline. It's also the truth. The woman by the bookshelf spoke up. I'm Rebecca Kim, Chief Legal Officer. I've spent the last 8 hours investigating you, Mr. Carter, and I have to say your story doesn't add up. Ethan waited. You graduated high school in Detroit, Rebecca continued. Decent grades, nothing exceptional. You were accepted to Michigan State with a partial scholarship for engineering, but you never attended. Instead, you worked a series of manual labor jobs, construction, warehouse work, automotive repair. Then 4 years ago, you moved here and started working for Blackstone as maintenance staff. She paused. What I can't find is any explanation for how a high school graduate with no formal training became capable of solving problems that stumped our entire engineering department. I read a lot, Ethan said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Marcus stepped forward. Look, man, nobody's accusing you of anything. We're just trying to understand. What you did last night, that wasn't beginner's luck. That was expertise. Real deep expertise. Where did it come from? Ethan looked at the four faces staring at him and realized they weren't going to let this go. They needed a narrative that made sense, a story that fit their understanding of how the world worked. The truth wouldn't satisfy them. The truth never did. My father was an engineer, Ethan said slowly. Didn't have a degree, but he understood systems better than most people with PhDs. He taught me to see patterns, to think about how things actually work instead of how they're supposed to work. Where is he now? Vanessa asked. Dead. Cancer. 7 years ago. Something shifted in Vanessa's expression. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition, maybe. You said you were accepted to Michigan State, James said. Why didn't you go? Ethan almost laughed. Because scholarships don't cover everything. Because I had rent to pay and food to buy. Because my girlfriend got pregnant and suddenly college seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. The room went quiet again. Emma's mother? Vanessa asked. Yeah. Where is she? Gone. Left when Emma was 6 months old. Haven't heard from her since. Rebecca made a note on her tablet. Ethan hated that. Hated being turned into data points, cataloged and analyzed like a machine instead of a person. Here's what I don't understand, Vanessa said, leaning forward. You're clearly brilliant. Brilliant enough to have your pick of opportunities. Why are you working as a janitor? Because janitorial work pays $17 an hour plus benefits, and lets me work nights so I can be home during the day when my daughter needs me, Ethan said. Because engineering jobs require degrees I don't have, and experience I can't get without degrees. Because the world doesn't care how smart you are if you can't prove it on paper. The world cares about results, James interjected. Last night you delivered results that could save this company billions. That has value. Value to who? To you, Vanessa said. I want to offer you a position, Senior Systems Architect, salary commensurate with your abilities, full benefits, stock options. Ethan stared at her. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you the job you should have had all along. I don't have a degree. I don't care. I don't have experience. You redesigned our entire Brisbane project in 20 minutes. That's more relevant experience than most of our engineers have accumulated in their entire careers. Ethan sat back in his chair. This should have been everything he wanted. Financial security, recognition, a chance to use his mind instead of just his hands. Instead, he felt trapped. What's the salary? He asked. Vanessa wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. Ethan looked at it, then looked at it again. That's more than I make in 2 years. That's the starting salary, Vanessa said. With performance bonuses and stock options, you could be looking at 3 or 4 times that much within 18 months. The money was obscene, life-changing. Emma could have everything she needed, everything she deserved. Better schools, better clothes, a bedroom that didn't have a crack running across the ceiling. I need to think about it, Ethan said. Vanessa's expression hardened. You need to think about whether you want financial security and professional recognition. I need to think about whether I want to work for someone who spent an hour last night humiliating me in front of 300 people. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Marcus cleared his throat. Rebecca suddenly became very interested in her tablet. James watched with the detached interest of someone observing a car crash. Vanessa stood up slowly. I apologized for that. You apologized because I was right, Ethan said. If I'd been wrong, you would have had security escort me out of the building. That's not fair, isn't it? They stared at each other across the expensive desk. Vanessa's jaw was tight, her hands pressed flat against the polished surface. Ethan could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, how to regain control, how to turn this back into a situation she could manage. You're angry, she said finally. I understand that, but letting anger override good judgment is what you did last night, Ethan interrupted. You let your assumptions override your judgment. Now you're asking me to trust that you won't do it again. I'm asking you to accept an opportunity that could transform your life. You're asking me to trust you. Those aren't the same thing. Vanessa sat back down. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, controlled. What do you want? I want to know this is real, Ethan said. Not some PR stunt. Not you covering your ass because investors saw what happened last night. I want to know that if I take this job, I'm being hired for my abilities, not because you're afraid of the lawsuit I could file. We're not afraid of lawsuits, Rebecca said automatically. Then I'll file one, Ethan said. Hostile work environment, public humiliation. I'm sure your legal team can imagine the headlines. CEO mocks janitor before he saves company billions. That'll play great on social media. Rebecca's face went pale. James laughed outright. Vanessa didn't react at all. She just kept staring at Ethan with those cold gray eyes. You're not going to file a lawsuit, she said. How do you know? Because you're not that kind of person. If you were, you would have demanded money last night instead of going home to your daughter. She wasn't wrong. Ethan hated that she wasn't wrong. Here's what I think, Vanessa continued. I think you're scared. I think this opportunity terrifies you because it means stepping out of the shadows where you've been hiding for 4 years. I think you're looking for reasons to say no because saying yes means risking failure in front of people who matter. You don't know anything about me. I know you're brilliant and you're wasting it, Vanessa said. I know you're raising a daughter in a 1-bedroom apartment on $17 an hour when you could be giving her so much more. I know you're afraid of being visible because invisible is safe. And I know that fear is going to trap you forever if you let it. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, to walk out of this office and back to the comfortable invisibility of his maintenance job. Instead, he said, I need guarantees. What kind of guarantees? In writing. Employment contract that protects me if this doesn't work out. Education benefits so I can finish my degree. Flexible hours so I can still be there for Emma. And if anyone in this company treats me the way you treated me last night, I walk with 6 months severance. Vanessa glanced at Rebecca. Can we do that? It's unusual, Rebecca said carefully, but not impossible. Then draft it, Vanessa said. She turned back to Ethan. Anything else? Yeah, I want to keep my maintenance job. Everyone in the room stared at him. I'm sorry, what? Marcus said. I want to keep working maintenance, part-time, 2 nights a week. That's insane, Vanessa said. Why would you want to? Because I'm good at it, Ethan said. Because it keeps me grounded. Because the people down in those lower levels actually talk to me like I'm human. And because I don't trust that this is going to last. The honesty seemed to catch Vanessa off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Fine, she said, 2 nights a week. But if your maintenance work interferes with your project deadlines, it won't. How can you be sure? Because I've been doing both jobs for 4 years. I can handle it. Vanessa stood and walked to the windows. The morning sun turned her silhouette into something sharp and angular. When she spoke again, her back was still turned. I don't like you, she said. The feeling's mutual, Ethan replied. You're arrogant, difficult. You clearly have authority issues. And you're condescending, controlling, and you treat people like assets instead of human beings. Marcus made a choking sound. Rebecca looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. James was openly grinning now. Vanessa turned around. This is going to be a disaster. Probably, Ethan agreed. When can you start? I need 2 weeks to transition my maintenance duties, and I need to talk to Emma. Explain what's happening. 2 weeks, Vanessa said. Rebecca will have the contract ready by end of day tomorrow. Read it carefully. We'll negotiate from there. It wasn't quite an agreement. It was more like a temporary truce between 2 people who didn't trust each other but needed each other anyway. Ethan stood. I should go. Wait, Vanessa said. One more thing. The solution you presented last night, I need you to document it. Everything. Your methodology, your calculations, your behavioral mapping. We need it formalized before we can implement it. I'll work on it. I need it in 2 weeks. That's not enough time. Make time, Vanessa said. This is what the job actually is, Ethan. Impossible deadlines, unreasonable demands. Welcome to the executive level. Sounds terrible. It is, Vanessa said. But it pays better than $17 an hour. Ethan left the office and took the elevator down to the maintenance levels. His real shift didn't start for hours, but he needed to be somewhere familiar, somewhere that made sense. The lower levels of Blackstone Technologies were a different world from the polished executive floors. Concrete instead of marble. Fluorescent lights instead of designer fixtures. The smell of machine oil and cleaning chemicals instead of expensive coffee and perfume. Ethan found Rodriguez in the maintenance shop, working on a compressor unit. Heard you caused some excitement last night, Rodriguez said without looking up. News travels fast. You made Vanessa Whitmore apologize in public. That's not news. That's a miracle. Rodriguez set down his wrench. They offering you a promotion? Something like that. You gonna take it? I don't know. Why not? Ethan sat down on a workbench. Because I've been invisible for 4 years. Invisible is safe. The second I step into that world up there, everything changes. Everything's already changed, Rodriguez pointed out. You can't go back to invisible. Not after last night. He wasn't wrong. What would you do? Ethan asked. Rodriguez thought about it. I'd take the money. Give your kid a better life. But I'd also watch my back. People like Vanessa Whitmore don't forgive people for showing them up. She'll smile and offer you the world, then find a way to make you pay for it later. That's cheerful. That's reality. Rodriguez picked up his wrench again. But hell, what do I know? I'm just a maintenance guy. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. Me too. He spent the rest of the day working on machinery that didn't judge him, didn't demand explanations, didn't care about his credentials or his background. By the time his official shift started at 11 p.m., he was exhausted. The executive offices were quiet at night. Most of the floor was empty, just a few workaholics still at their desks, typing away at problems that probably could have waited until morning. Ethan cleaned Vanessa's office last. He emptied her trash can, full of crumpled papers and an empty bottle of aspirin, wiped down her desk, vacuumed the expensive carpet. There was a folder on her desk labeled Carter E. He didn't open it, didn't need to. He knew what was inside. Background checks, contract drafts, analysis of last night's presentation. His life, reduced to data points. He finished cleaning and pushed his cart toward the elevator. The office felt different now, less like a place he worked and more like a cage he was about to step into voluntarily. His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. Can't sleep, thinking about Mom. Ethan's chest tightened. Emma didn't ask about her mother often. When she did, it usually meant something was wrong. He called her. Mrs. Chen answered on the second ring. She's okay, Mrs. Chen said immediately. Just having a hard night. You want to talk to her? Please. There was rustling, then Emma's small voice. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetie, Mrs. Chen says you can't sleep. I was thinking about Mom, about how she left. Emma paused. You're not going to leave, are you? The question hit him like a knife. Never, I promise. You promised to help with my project and you didn't. I know, I'm sorry. What if you get a new job and you're too busy and you forget about me? Emma, listen to me. I could never forget about you. You're the most important thing in my entire life. Nothing changes that. Not a new job, not anything. You promise? I promise. He heard her breathe, small and shaky. Okay. I'll be home in a few hours, Ethan said. We'll have breakfast together before school. And tonight, we're finishing that solar system project. Deal? Deal. She hung up. Ethan stood in the empty hallway holding his phone, thinking about promises and the weight they carried. The elevator doors opened. Vanessa stepped out. She stopped when she saw him. You're still here. Night shift. Right. She looked tired. The polished CEO facade had cracked slightly, revealing something more human underneath. I left something in my office. It's unlocked. They stood there awkwardly. Ethan had seen her commanding rooms, making decisions worth millions, firing people without blinking. He'd never seen her uncertain before. What you said earlier, Vanessa said, about me treating people like assets. You were right. Ethan waited. I built this company from nothing, she continued. I was 24 years old, broke, working out of my apartment. Everyone told me I'd fail. Everyone. And when I succeeded anyway, I swore I'd never be vulnerable again. Never be in a position where anyone could dismiss me or underestimate me. So you became the person who dismisses and underestimates everyone else. Yes, Vanessa said quietly. I did. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want you to make the same mistake. She looked at him directly. You're stepping into a world that will try to change you, that will reward you for being ruthless and punish you for being kind. Don't let it. Don't become what I became. And what's that? Someone who wins everything and loses the parts that actually matter. She walked past him toward her office. Ethan watched her go, trying to reconcile the woman who'd humiliated him last night with the person who'd just shown him something uncomfortably close to genuine vulnerability. People were complicated. He kept forgetting that. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Vanessa approved your contract terms. Rebecca will have it ready tomorrow. Congratulations, man. You're about to become very rich and very stressed. Ethan read the message twice. Then he pushed his cleaning cart toward the elevator and went back to work. In 2 weeks, everything would change. For now, he was still invisible, still safe, still himself. The contract arrived the next afternoon in a manila envelope so thick it looked like a textbook. Ethan sat at his kitchen table with Emma doing homework across from him and stared at the thing like it might bite. What's that? Emma asked, not looking up from her math worksheet. Work stuff. Boring work stuff or interesting work stuff? I don't know yet. He opened the envelope and pulled out what had to be 50 pages of legal language. Rebecca had included sticky notes marking where he needed to sign, along with a handwritten note on Blackstone letterhead. Read pages 12, 27, and 43 carefully. The rest is standard boilerplate. Call me if you have questions. And congratulations. You negotiated better terms than most of our executives. RK. Ethan flipped to page 12. Compensation package. The number looked even more obscene in print than it had on Vanessa's notepad. Base salary, performance bonuses, stock options that vested over 4 years, education benefits up to $50,000 annually, health insurance that actually covered things. Page 27 covered termination clauses. If Blackstone let him go without cause within the first 2 years, he walked away with 6 months' salary. If anyone in the company created a hostile work environment that he could document, same deal. Rebecca had actually written that into the contract. Page 43 detailed his dual role arrangement. Senior systems architect, 40 hours per week, with the option to maintain part-time maintenance work up to 16 hours per week, as long as it didn't interfere with project deadlines. It was everything he'd asked for, which made him more nervous, not less. Dad, you're making your worried face, Emma said. I'm not worried. Your eyebrows do this thing when you're worried, she demonstrated, scrunching her forehead dramatically. I don't look like that. You totally do. Ethan set down the contract. What if I told you my job might change, that I might be doing something different? Emma looked up from her worksheet. Different how? Different like working during the day sometimes instead of just at night. Different like maybe we could move to a nicer apartment. Different like you could go to a better school if you wanted. I like my school, Emma said. Mia goes to my school. I know. You wouldn't have to change schools if you didn't want to. I'm just saying we'd have options. Emma studied him with those dark eyes that saw too much. Is this about money? Kind of. Are we poor? The question caught him off guard. Why would you think that? Because Mia's mom drives a new car and we have the one with the rust spot. And because you always look at prices before you buy things at the store. And because our apartment is smaller than hers. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. We're not poor, sweetie. We just have to be careful with money. But we'd be less careful if you took the new job? Yeah. Emma thought about this for a minute. Would you be happier? I don't know. Then why do it? It was such a simple question, such an 8-year-old question. And Ethan didn't have a good answer. Because I want to give you things, he said finally. Better things. Things you deserve. I don't need better things, Emma said. I need you to help with my science project like you promised. She went back to her math worksheet like the conversation was over. Ethan sat there holding a contract worth more money than he'd ever imagined having and feeling like he'd just failed some kind of test. That evening, they worked on the solar system project together. Emma had decided Saturn's rings should be made from old CDs. She'd been right about that. But they didn't have enough CDs. Ethan ended up driving to 3 different thrift stores before finding a box of them for $2. They sat on the living room floor cutting and gluing while an old Pixar movie played on the TV neither of them was watching. Emma narrated facts about each planet as she painted them. Jupiter's red spot was actually a storm bigger than Earth. Venus rotated backwards. Neptune had winds faster than the speed of sound. How do you know all this? Ethan asked. Library books and YouTube. Ethan smiled. Where'd you learn to do research? From you, obviously. Obviously. By the time they finished, it was past Emma's bedtime and the project looked amazing. Not perfect. The CDs were slightly crooked and some of the paint had bled, but amazing in the way kid projects should be, full of effort and enthusiasm and personality. It's perfect, Emma declared. It really is, Ethan agreed. She looked at him seriously. Are you going to take the job? Probably. Even though you don't know if it'll make you happy? Yeah. That's dumb. I know. Emma hugged him goodnight and went to brush her teeth. Ethan cleaned up the craft supplies, carefully boxed up the solar system, and sat on the couch staring at the contract he'd left on the coffee table. His phone rang. Vanessa. It's almost 10 p.m., Ethan said when he answered. I'm aware. Did you read the contract? Most of it. And it's either extremely generous or a very elaborate trap. Can it be both? Vanessa said. He could hear the slight amusement in her voice. I need your answer by Monday. The Brisbane project can't wait any longer. That's 3 days away. I'm aware of that too. Can you do it or not? Ethan looked at the solar system project sitting on his coffee table, at the rust spot on his car keys, at the crack in the ceiling he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. Yeah, he said. I can do it. Good. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Wear something that isn't a maintenance uniform. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan spent Saturday morning at Goodwill buying clothes that might pass for business casual. He settled on 2 pairs of khakis, 3 button-down shirts, and a blazer that almost fit. The total came to $43. The woman at the register gave him a discount because one of the shirts had a small stain on the cuff. Sunday he took Emma to the park. She wanted to practice for her school's field day, specifically the 3-legged race, which required a partner. They tied their legs together with an old scarf and tried to run. They fell over immediately. We're terrible at this, Emma laughed. Absolutely terrible, Ethan agreed. They tried again and again. By the 10th attempt, they'd managed 5 whole steps before collapsing into the grass. Maybe I should find a different partner, Emma said. Probably smart. But that wouldn't be as fun. They lay in the grass looking up at the sky. A plane passed overhead, drawing a white line across the blue. Dad? Yeah? Are you scared about your new job? Ethan thought about lying, decided against it. Terrified. Why? Because I don't know if I'm good enough. Because I might fail. Because everything might fall apart. But you might be great at it too, Emma pointed out. Maybe. You solved that big problem at work, right? The one you told me about? I did. Then you're probably good enough. She sat up, pulling grass out of her hair. And if you're not, you'll figure it out. That's what you always tell me when I'm worried about stuff. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't listen. Monday morning arrived too fast. Ethan dropped Emma at school, drove to Blackstone Technologies, and sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes trying to convince himself to go inside. The Goodwill blazer felt wrong. The khakis felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. He went inside anyway. The 14th floor looked different during business hours, full of people in expensive suits moving with purpose.